my guest, Evan Rieser. Evan, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Jackson. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here. Exciting day for all Philadelphia sports fans, and let's get going. I'm fired up.
So this isn't going to be our typical Weird with Webster today. Normally I would talk about sports history, but today has just been one of those days in sports where just everything goes insane. This morning we had Rob Manfred come out and speak about the universal DH. That'll affect baseball tremendously. And then obviously we had the NBA trade deadline, the blockbuster trade of Ben Simmons leaving Philadelphia. He's going to the Brooklyn Nets. James Harden coming in. Then we just had bombshell news just happened about a couple minutes ago that the Coyotes are almost basically going to be guaranteed to be playing in Tempe in the ASU arena. So let's start off with obviously the biggest news for me and you. We are both 76ers fans. James Harden is coming to the Sixers. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think it's an exciting day. This organization has been a joke for the better part of the last 20 years. Growing up in Philadelphia, you go to a game for $8, right? Because that was the process there as Sixers. And when it felt like they came out of the process, they still weren't good enough, right? And the whole tanking process, it just wasn't good enough. So then you had to make moves to get yourself over that hump. And 2 years ago, when you bring in Jimmy Butler and you make the move for Tobias Harris and Boban, it felt like you got over that hump. But there was one key piece that was still holding you back. And that's been not just last year, not the year before that, but since the Celtics series 3-4 years ago. Ben Simmons has been the problem in Philadelphia. If you have a point guard that can't shoot, you can't win.
I agree.
It's the end of the day.
I mean, a lot of people, a lot of 76ers fans, I know my sister especially, she was frustrated to see Curry and Drummond go. Do you think the 76ers gave up too much in this trade?
No, not at all. I think
that.
this is the almost, if you were writing a script to say, here's the best case scenario for Sixers fans to get James Harden, I think this is it. I think for them to keep both their best young pieces in Thibault and Maxey is a godsend, more or less. The fact that they didn't have to give up Tyrese Maxey in this deal keeps them in contention if it doesn't work out with Harden. Because Maxey is only getting better. We can see he's going to be a pretty good point guard in this league. And what's so exciting is that through all of this, the Sixers, after the James Harden deal and after Harden's gone, won't be completely out of contention. It won't be back into tank mode because you still have your young pieces in Thibault and Maxey.
So, do you think with Curry leaving the 76ers, that do the Sixers have a reliable shooter? Can Danny Green be that guy that Curry was? Can Tobias Harris fill that gap that is going to be left that we saw in the series really a couple of years ago when the 76ers did not have perimeter shooting? Is there someone who can fill that gap for the 76ers?
Well, I think the answer is yeah. And I don't think it's Tobias Harris. I think Tobias Harris is the worst player on the starting five as of today. I truly believe that. I think. But in all honesty, you just got the best scorer in NBA history, if not number two. Right? 2 years ago, or last year, we're talking about Ben Simmons for LeVert and those guys, right? And while they're nice pieces in the NBA, you're talking about the second best scorer the league has ever seen. Doesn't matter if it's coming from the three ball, the interior, the mid-range game. While the three ball is important, especially in today's NBA, you have a premier talent now in the building that's going to work hand in hand with Simmons. Maybe they need one more piece in perimeter shooting. I don't think it's a problem. They're making a deep playoff run with the team they have today, whether they can shoot or not.
So Simon Williams put out a tweet well known here at Blaze Radio, obviously, where the Sixers traded for Drew Holiday for a draft pick that they'd use on Alfred Payton, who they used to draft or trade for Dario Saric, who they trade for Jimmy Butler, who they trade for Josh Richardson, who they trade for Curry, who was just traded for James Harden and Paul Millsap. So the timeline of events there, kind of crazy to see how it all worked out and how this process really started with Drew Holiday, who was on the 2012 Sixers, which was the last time, before the whole process that they even made the playoffs. Iguodala's big free throws against the Bulls in that series, Derrick Rose got hurt. So seeing the process play out, is it something that you would go through again?
Oh, no. No. I think, I think the Sacramento Kings said it best the other day, and to be honest with you, whether you agree with it or not, at the end of the day, sports is a business. It's about making revenue. The Sixers tanking lost them so much revenue that they, from the ownership to the players, they needed to find ways to create more and more money. So as soon as they got out of the process, it was a mad dash because they needed to start creating income. And I wouldn't go through that process again. So while the process may have worked, the only thing they got from it is Joel Embiid. 12 years of whatever it was, right? 8 years of tanking. Going out there with the intent to lose basketball games. All they got was Joel Embiid. Sure, they got James Harden, but they picked a player first overall that didn't want to play for them. They traded up to go pick, what's the other kid's name?
Markelle Fultz?
Markelle Fultz, thank you. They traded out to get him. That didn't work out. He's playing for the Orlando Magic still, right?
Yeah.
So
I don't even know if he's playing.
Yeah.
He still has a whole bunch of issues. I can just remember his free throw where he's tapping the ball between his fingers.
You have so many problems here. The dysfunction in the organization before this year was terrible. The fact that they kept Brett Brown for an extra 2 years was terrible. They really haven't done much well until they drafted Maxey.
So at this point, with the starting five that they have assembled now, do you think they are better than any other Sixers team, specifically the one that lost to the Raptors? And do you think that they could make the Eastern Conference Finals this year, which is a stage that we haven't even seen them get to since 2001, 2002? It's been that long for us Sixers fans. They haven't won a title since 1983. But can they get back to a point against these teams like the Nets, like the Bucks at this point?
Yeah, I think the Eastern Conference Finals is well in target for this team. It's tough to say, are they a better team than that team 2 years ago? I think that team 2 years ago may have been more complete, especially off the bench. But here's what I will say about this team is what we're not factoring in is, and we can look at it position to position, and we can look at Joel Embiid 2 years ago and Joel Embiid today. Joel Embiid today is tenfold a better player, significantly better player.
Oh, for sure.
As well as, you have a player that is, like I said, just one of the best scorers in NBA history. So I think the Eastern Conference Finals is very much in their sights, right? Like, if the season ended today, I think they would play the Celtics.
They're the 5 seed right now. I do know that.
Which would line them up against the Celtics. So tell me if I'm wrong there, Jackson.
Isn't it one versus? Well, they do the play-in round now,
yeah.
So it's all sorts of confusing. I think they would be. I believe they would be matched up with the Celtics. Yeah, it's one versus whoever the play-in round.
So let's say it's the Celtics, right? And that's a huge hump for the Sixers. And it may not seem like that, but they've yet to beat the Celtics in the playoffs.
It's a struggle. We got swept by them.
Yeah, and it says something, and it's a rivalry. So it's one of those things. That's a huge hump. That's an underrated getting over that first level for the Sixers if they end up playing them in the first round, and it's scary. So if they get through them, then you're looking at, maybe a Chicago team this second round. Maybe you see a Brooklyn in the second round, and that's where the struggle is. But if a Brooklyn's to make a run here late, they could play a 1 seed Miami, and you could get caught playing the Bucks. So it's going to be interesting to see how this Eastern Conference finishes up, because I think that has so much to do about it, is where you're seated, who you're going to play.
2 or 3 years from now, when we're looking back at this trade and we see the contract that Harden's under, is this a similar situation to some of the worst contracts that we've seen in Russell Westbrook right now? Is it a similar situation to that, in your opinion?
No. I think it's two things here. You win a championship, nobody cares.
Mm-hmm.
If you get there and you win, nobody cares. Seriously. It didn't matter. The Russell Westbrook contract is a whole nother, debacle.
Mm-hmm.
Considering 2 years ago they won a championship. They were in contention, last year with some injury and everything like that. And they had to run into a Suns team of destiny just to get there, apparently, but not to win it all. And then the next year, you sign Westbrook, you think you're making the team better, and now you've only created this team and made this team worse, with LeBron James having one of his best years of his career.
Mm-hmm.
So, do I think the contracts compute? Maybe. Maybe they do if James Harden is terrible. But to be honest with you, they got Ben Simmons off their payroll.
Mm-hmm. That's big. That's one of the biggest parts of this trade. And the whole saga of just having to deal with the drama was so exhausting that now that it's finally over, do you feel like a weight's been lifted off your shoulders? Because I do.
Yeah, I think that's so important listen, they just dumped a player that was never playing for them and was a massive part of their payroll.
Mm-hmm.
And in return, they have a former MVP. A couple of years ago, James Harden was voted the best player in the best league in the world. Take that in. He was the best player in the universe. And he's going to play with this year's best player in the universe. That has to run together.
Do you think a lot of people have talked about how Harden kind of gets lazy on offense, but we might have just seen that because of how he's won it out of 2 teams in 2 years, and he didn't want that whole narrative to be out there. He didn't want to request a trade like he did with the Rockets. How do you think they play off each other? Screens that lead to handoffs in the post? What kind of plays do you think the Sixers run here to make things work?
I think that's tough. I just say, I think that's going to be figured out in game 1 or 2. Listen, I don't think the first games are going to be awfully pretty. I think the first one might. Adrenaline pumping. It's in the Wells Fargo Center tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that those things could be really exciting. We could see Harden drop 30 and maybe Embiid do the same, right? That'd be really fun for the fans. I think that could happen. But after that, it might be some trying out periods. I think you have 2 elite players that are going to try and play off each other, and that might take a week or 2 to learn. But that's fine. I don't know how it's gonna work, but you know what I do know? It's going to work, right? These 2 guys, they seem to fit each other. The way they play, just on 2 opposite teams, seem to work really well. So it's going to be fun to see Joel Embiid. As he's gotten a little older, as he's gotten a little bit more experience, he's moved into the paint a lot more. Mm-hmm. And if we can have Harden working on the perimeter in that mid-range game, Joel Embiid dominating in the paint like he does with that little turnaround jumper he's got right now, let me tell you, this team's going to be unstoppable.
So let's fast forward a month here. March 10th, 2022. The Nets are visiting the 76ers. To me, I'm looking forward to that game. I'm going to be looking forward to what the atmosphere has to bring. I'm going to be looking to see, do you think there's any shot that Ben Simmons plays?
Yeah. To be honest with you, when the trade went through this morning, afternoon for those on the East Coast, I thought, is Ben Simmons actually going to play? What do we know about Ben Simmons, right? And I think the thought process was, is if Ben Simmons ever goes to California to play for the Lakers, mm-hmm. to play for the Oakland, or to go play down that in Southern California, he may never play. Seriously, he may never play a game if he went to California. Mm-hmm. But now we're seeing him in New York. It seems like he's excited to work with. That was a Woj tweet that he's excited to work with Kyrie, as well as obviously the big dog there, Kevin Durant. So I think he'll play, and I think for him, there's two ways to look at it. One, this March 10th game is going to have him fired up and ready to go. Two, he'll fold, and he won't play because a sore hamstring or something like that, which wouldn't surprise me either.
I believe in two. I think, to be honest with you, I think Ben Simmons is a coward, and he's not going to want to face that. He turned his back on all those people. All those people are ready with pitchforks outside the Wells Fargo Center. I think there's no shot he plays. I think there's some excuse that he comes up with. If he's even playing by then, I'm sure he will be playing.
Yeah, that's the question of when is he ready, and when is he ready to play at, I hate to say his normal elite level. Listen, if there was no basket in basketball, Ben Simmons would be the best player in the world. Seriously, he is so good at everything but putting the ball in the hoop.
And passing to Matisse Thybulle when he has a wide open hoop as well.
So it's going to be interesting to see. I don't know if he'll play in that game. I think there's a lot of ways out, and there's some ways that he may want to play. So it's going to be interesting to see.
And then another thing that's been going on is the picks since 2016 in Philly sports. We obviously have Markelle Fultz, who's with the Orlando Magic. He was drafted number 1. Ben Simmons, now a Brooklyn Net. He was drafted number 1. Mickey Moniak, he is the only one still within a Philadelphia organization, but he is currently playing for the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs. The Phillies do have center field gaps, but I don't think he ever cracks.
He won't win the job.
And then we have Carson Wentz, who is obviously now an Indianapolis Colt, and Nolan Patrick, who plays for the Las Vegas Golden Knights. The inability to draft stars in those situations, where we could have had another scenario like Philadelphia had in 1980, where all the teams, the Sixers, the Flyers, the Eagles, the Phillies, all make it to the championship. I mean, that's unheard of in sports. To have that opportunity where you all are pretty much terrible within those same years, to build up back to that, you had a chance. And for none of them, absolutely none of them, to work out is mind-boggling to me. Well,
Jackson, welcome to being a Philadelphia sports
fan. It's a rough life out here.
Because that's what sums it up. And it's a shame. It really is. And you're not even getting into the depths of it. You're really not. I could go off about Howie Roseman and his inability and his incompetence in his job for 5 hours today. But I won't get there. It's a happy day. We're supposed to be talking about James Harden. But I think what's really cool is through all of this, somehow they've stayed in contention. Right? All 4 teams, and I'll say all 4 because obviously the Flyers are bad now, but last year, 2 years ago, they were there.
Right? They were 1 game away from going to the conference finals,
and they were knocking on the door. So I think that despite all that, 4 years ago the Eagles won a Super Bowl. And listen, I'm the biggest fire Howie Roseman dude you will ever meet. I have a custom hat that I got at Lids with a fire Howie Roseman. For those of you who don't know, I just ordered an Eagles jersey, number 18, Justin Jefferson.
Oh, boy.
Just to wear that to the game to be funny. But I'm the biggest fire Howie Roseman guy you'll ever meet. 4 years ago, they won a championship. The Sixers are in and out of contention every year. 2 years ago, they're 1 shot from the Eastern Conference Finals. Okay? The Eagles have made the playoffs 3 of the last 5 years. So, 3 of the 4 teams in recent years have seen a good amount of success. And I hate to say that. I really hate giving any of their teams credit. Because I think they're so incompetent in all 3 front offices that it's appalling. The biggest point here is the Phillies. Listen, it's hard to hit in baseball and draft picks. It's not easy. But this team needs major help. Major help. And you touched on the universal designated hitter, and I think that actually helps them.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think what will happen is Rieser will play DH, Bohm will play first, Gene will play second, and they'll go from there. But they still have massive gaps in left field. They don't have anybody to play left field as of now. They don't have anybody that's going to play center. Third base has a vacancy.
My point about third base is I believe they should sign Chris Bryant. He has the versatility to play the outfield and third base. And I don't know why that's not talked about more. I understand from a money standpoint that it's tough. But if he fills two gaps, why not explore that option? And Kyle Schwarber's been an option, and all these people.
I don't think if you bring in Schwarber, you're definitely not out on Bryant's mistakes. So the Bryant thing, I would love to bring in Chris Bryant. Love to. Man, does he want to come here? That's the question there. And what's his price and what's his money? I'm all for paying players in baseball, because listen, with no salary cap, players pay for themselves. Bryce Harper, he makes $33 million a year, a little bit less than that. But here's what I'll tell you. In his first year, the Phillies sold out all 3 of the first games. If you took the revenue just by Ticketmaster, those 3 games, he paid for half his contracts in the first 3 days.
And that's why it doesn't make sense to me why people were so upset about, other baseball fans saying, oh, you overpaid for him, or they'll say overrated now and stuff. But they'll always say that. So let's try to predict a starting lineup for opening day, if opening day does roll around. I got Real Muto obviously at catcher. You say Bohm at first, I like that. First. Gene Segura over at second base. Yep. I got Bryson Stott over at shortstop. I think it'll be Torreyes opening day. I think, what about Gregorius? They don't they let him go?
Torreyes opening day.
Torreyes opening day, but does Stott eventually work back towards that?
Yeah, and he may get the third base job later in the year, or the shortstop job, or they'll move Torreyes to third and put Stott at short. But right now, I think by opening day, it's Torreyes.
So then you got Matt Verling over in left field.
Vierling?
Vierling.
First of all, I really like Vierling.
Really?
He's got a good game to him. Yeah, I do. I'll be one to say that I really like him. He's 6'6". He puts the bat on the ball a lot. I love his swing path. His bat stays in the zone for a long time, and I think he's going to be a decent piece for this team. Listen, he was really good off the bench last year. He really was. And Travis Jankowski, you know what I mean? So that could be, they could do a platoon, which I would just love. Platooning doesn't happen enough in baseball anymore. And if they could platoon Jankowski against righties, Vierling against lefties all year in left field, you could really make that work.
The real problem with the Phillies, in my opinion, though, is not as much as the hitting. It's the bullpen and the starters. You got Wheeler, and you have a very inconsistent Aaron Nola. And then you have anyone's guess, really. I mean, you got, what's-his-face that we got last year, the ground ball pitcher. I don't know why.
Well, the third pitcher is going to be
Kyle Gibson.
Kyle Gibson.
Yes, that's his name.
And the fourth pitcher is going probably to be Suarez.
Ranger Suarez works, but
who I'll tell you is a pretty good fourth starter in this league. Now they need a more consistent fifth, which isn't a problem. That's a kind of an easy fix.
But the bullpen, losing Suarez out of the bullpen is really where this team comes back to.
The Phillies made a move in the bullpen already.
It's not great.
But here's what I'll tell you. And listen, they still need 2 to 3 arms. 2 to 3 arms.
They lost Hector Neris.
But they lost Hector. Yeah. Who cares that they lost Hector Neris? Hector Neris is the most overrated reliever in the major leagues.
That's true, but he also doesn't he lead the Phillies all times in saves?
Who cares? Jonathan Papelbon's third. Doesn't that say enough?
That just means the Phillies have had really bad closes for a long time. It doesn't matter.
I don't care if he leads the league in saves. I don't care if he leads the team in strikeouts. I really don't. This league is about winning. Say what you will, Hector Neris loses them more games than he wins them with big saves. Period. End of the day. End of discussion.
So you think with the bullpen currently configured right now that this Phillies team could make a postseason run?
That's not the question, though. That's the problem that's not the problem with baseball. That's the great thing about baseball. You don't need to make a postseason run. You just need to be in contention by July. And the batters themselves keep you in contention by
But July. We've seen this team be in contention in July, and they fall off every September.
Because they haven't made good moves at deadline.
So who would you make a move for in September or in July at this point to both boost your offense, boost your defense, boost your pitching in September?
I mean, here's the problem though, right? Is we don't know where free agency is going to go, right? So let's say they bring in Bryant, then your deadline acquisition or your moves are going to be centered in the bullpen. You would hope that Bryant shores up the rest of the offense. You bring in maybe another piece like Schwarber in there that gets you another lefty bat a little later in the lineup that can hit the long ball. So it depends on which way they go in the rest of free agency. Now, keep in mind, there are still some bullpen guys and some starters left in the discussion, right? So if they go that route, then maybe we see a player like another hitter. And it's not going to be somebody as good as Bryant.
No.
But some of these guys are going to get one-year deals. These Rizzos of the world, maybe they bring in Rizzo to hit the DH or something like that. They have options. This team, and that's what's exciting about it, is this team is almost a playoff team. They're really, really close. And say what you will, they didn't win a division that only had 87 wins, that only took 87 wins. But that Braves team that the Phillies split with all year, guess what? They were just good enough to win it all without their best player.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time here. I did want to ask you today's trivia question because it is something that we do here. We keep track of. Keep track of the score. Currently, I believe Adriana Dupadre, my best friend, she leads it. She's at 2.5, and then we have someone at 2 as well. So my trivia question for you today is: name the 4 NFL teams who have never made the Super Bowl.
All right, Lions.
All right, that's 1.
Never made it. Chargers.
Chargers have made the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Oh yeah, with Fouts. Oh wow, this is crazy.
Yeah, it's a good one. I will post it on Twitter. We are out of time here, so we do have to get going, but I will post it on Twitter. You can answer it over there, and you will get a point at the end of the semester. Someone will get a prize of some sort. I haven't figured it out what yet, but that is going to do it for us here today from Weird with Webster, which was basically Philly Sports Talk. So I hope everyone on Taylor Mall enjoyed the Philly Sports Talk, and we will see you all next week.